Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. This will be part 2 in the series of the store-bought Phalaenopsis. We bought them home and then just put them on the table, left them, you know, busy person, all that. But in this video we'll get them out of their packaging and have an initial look over them and see what we've got. So I'm just going to move that one over there a bit and we'll get this one out. And we'll see what we've got. Now, when you cut things with scissors, sharp knives, etc., and it's a plant, make sure you only cut the packaging and not the leaves, the spike, aerial roots, or anything else that might be lying around. Right, initially, first thing I'm going to do is look at the label on the packaging. Yeah. Now, that has got some sort of serial number and an address on it. That address is in Milton Keynes, which is in the UK. Now I can pretty well 100% assure you that's not where it was grown. So get rid of the packaging. But what we will do is have a look and see if we've got, yes we have. Now on that packaging it said houseplant. But we do have a label that says Phalaenopsis. Yeah? Right, that's the bit I'm after. Yeah, on the back you've got pictorial care guide, effectively, which gives you a temperature range, some sort of feeding guide, although I can't make that out, a warning against sun, and it says there water twice a week. And I love this, it says don't eat. Knife and fork crossed out. I love that one. I doubt if it would do you any harm, but what I was after was that little bit down there. It actually says Crea Green. Now that could be some sort of trade name for the actual plant, but what I'm hoping is that is the grower, the actual nursery. Yeah, and often you can pick up like a nursery name off of a tag like that and Google that and have a look, and on some of them I've come across, they will have pictures of their current range of plants for the trade. They're not for us, this is for the trade to go in and order, you know, 500 or something like that. But that may give you a name for your plant. It may not. And the name it gives you may well be their own trade name and it's not registered. But it's always worth a look. Yeah, so that's that bit. If you're interested in the name, some people can't be bothered. Right, now as far as the plant is concerned, we have the usual slightly bent leaves where it's been in its packaging. Sometimes they will straighten out and sometimes they won't. And the first thing I've got is there are 2 plants. Yeah? Now, I don't know whether those are 2 entirely separate plants or whether it's a clump forming Phalaenopsis. You don't come across these very often, but there are some species that have a natural trait of forming a clump. Yeah? So they produce side growths that then grow on to match the size of the original plant and they form a clump. Strictly speaking, they're not keikis. A keiki on a Phalaenopsis would be something that grew off of the bloom spike under normal circumstances. That would be a true keiki. And that does happen. Yeah. So I may have a clump forming type. And if I have, one of them has bloomed and so has the other one. So if you look in there, the plant that has no spike on it now has actually got a cut-off spike. So it has actually bloomed on both pieces. It's difficult to establish whether I've truly got 2 plants or a joined plant. We've got lots of roots that have managed to get out of the pot and rot. So these have gone. Yeah, these are no good. And that may well be where it was stood in water at some point in its travels. Yeah, we've got a few aerial roots on Phalaenopsis, that's okay, no big deal. Although, I mean that one's damaged, so that would have to come off anyway, that's no use anymore. And that's got no growing tip on it. But what we do have in the pot are some pretty reasonable roots. Yeah? I mean, I've seen Phalaenopsis in shops where I've been attracted by the pretty blooms. Not pretty blooms must have, just pretty blooms must have a look. And they're often sold in decorative pots, and you lift the pot out and it's been stood in water for like 2 weeks and everything in the pot's rotten. So there's no point in taking that home, it ain't going to make it. But that's got a good root system. Yeah? Now, what is it in? It's in what looks like a mix of proper bark and some of the coir stuff. I can see so either it's bark that's breaking down, or it's a mix of bark and coir. You can see the fibrous nature of some of that media. The media isn't soaking wet. It is slightly dark in places, but that's not wet. That's fine. So it hasn't been left soggy. And just teasing the pot gently from side to side, it's got a reasonable root mass there, so I don't think all of the roots are on the outside of the pot, which is often typical. So, leaf quality. The piece of plant here that I'm looking at, it's had some interruptions in growth. Got a nice leaf here, but that was, oh actually that leaf's on another plant, forget that, let's just go for the ones that are on this plant, right? So we've got leaves of a certain size, and the latest 2 leaves are slightly larger. There's no sign of a new one at the moment. So this piece of the plant is growing and progressing naturally. Nothing wrong with that at all. Slight marking there on the leaf. It's an older one, not fussed. Now let's come around this side. This is the one that isn't currently in bloom at the moment. And this is in the same boat. The latest 2 leaves are okay. Don't see any bugs. So I think we've got 2 plants that look quite nice there. Leaves are nice colour, not too dark, because too dark normally means they've been kept in the dark far too long. And if they've got yellow patches on them, they may have been left in the sun at some point, unpacked from a lorry, stuck in the car park, nobody available to come and take them in yet. Only takes an hour, don't take long. Yeah, the leaves are not fully hydrated. There's not a limpness there, but there isn't a fullness, a pumped up feel to them. And I would say that's as a result of needing a drink. So coming up to the flower spike, it's staked and it has one last bud to open, which I think that was an actual bud yesterday, and it's starting to open now. So we're unlikely to get bud blast at this stage of the game. Yeah, they're attractive blooms, and the blooms are all in good condition, quite honestly. So it's a nice spike. For a Phalaenopsis, it hasn't got a huge number of blooms on it. Yeah, and what it does have right at the top is the possibility of it extending. So the tip of the spike hasn't been damaged. Hang on, we're off the camera there. Yeah, so in behind the bud is what looks like a possible extension down the line. By having a bud that's just opened, or opening, it means these particular blooms haven't been open that long. They do open successively up a spike, so the oldest bloom on here could be a week or more, but not months. That's the problem when you buy one with a spike that's fully open. It might only have a few weeks to go, as opposed to a few months. So anyway, nice plant, no health issues, no mould growing in the pot, and needs a drink. So that's number 1. Let's move that out of the way now, so we don't knock it over. Oh, and by the way, that plant is in no hurry to be repotted. That media looks reasonable. Doesn't, you know. So let's have a look at the next one. And this has got the same manufacturers or growing nurseries tag in the pot, so it's come from the same place, which is, you know, when you get something in a supermarket or a garden centre, or in this case a DIY place, because I actually did the classic. I went in there to buy paint and some other stuff. I didn't go in there for orchids, but I did have in mind that I did say I would have a go at getting a couple of store-bought plants. Now, in that particular store, which was home-based for UK people, they have often got a good selection of Oncidium types, you know, sort of, you know, the intergenerics and things like that. And the idea was to get one of them as well as a orchid to grow in the home. But this time they only had Phalaenopsis, so that's what I came out with. Right, same tag on this one. And their origin, I've just noticed another tag on there, it does say Amsterdam. So the nursery is in Amsterdam, or near Amsterdam. There's a code on there as well. Might even be able to look that up. Anyway, with this one, we now have a single plant. Yeah, I've got white dots on a leaf. Immediately suspicious. Wet me finger. It's some sort of powder. It's not bugs. So we won't worry about that too much. So I've got some on the end of that little dead root. Nope, it's not bugs. It's something that looks like it may have been sprinkled on the surface and some got on the leaves. So they might have given it a dusting with something at some time. Now, as far as the plant is concerned, it's a little deep in the pot because the lowest leaf, which is a seedling leaf, so it doesn't matter, is actually below the surface of the media, which for Phalaenopsis is not the best of ideas. All the leaves need to be above the media. And the base of the stem where the highest roots come out needs to be above ground, basically. If there are roots that have come out of a lower portion of the stem that's already down there and there's not much you can do about it, that's fine. But the latest roots will progress up the stem as it gets older. Again, now this one looks like it's got a bit more moisture, and we've got some algae forming in the pot, which says to me straight away that it's been in the pot a little while. Now it's a clear pot, so if it's never been in a decorative pot, then algae would form in reasonable light, yeah? But I'm going to get my nose in this one, which I didn't do with the last one, if I can untangle it from Kaneko up there. That smells of bark. Now that, I'm glad I did that. Having just moved that bark to get my nose in it, can you see what I can see? There's some sort of plug in there that is a PT fibrous stuff. Now they are probably both the same, I just couldn't see it on the other one. It's very fibrous. So if these were planted in that type of plug, then the idea would have been that as the roots push through and everything, this becomes irrelevant and would just break down. Unfortunately with orchids we don't like stuff breaking down in our pots, do we? Because it can cause problems. But if it's got some sort of plug around the roots, that would make me think perhaps I ought to repot it a bit sooner than I would have done otherwise. Just to make sure that whatever that is comes off and gets untangled from the roots. Nonetheless, yet again, there's a good root system in there. That's not bad. And the media is a mix of bark and coir with the addition of this plug thing around there, which just looks like it's compressed peat. So it's a little pot made out of compressed peat that the plant would have been originally planted in, probably as a tiny little seedling. So not too bad. Now, this hasn't got quite such a good root system, but there's nothing wrong with it. The good thing about this is it's only got one aerial root to worry about, which the end has died, so it's not actively growing. Can't see many actively growing root tips in there. Nonetheless, it's not a bad root system. As far as the flower spike is concerned then, there is one bud left to open, which is just cracking now. In theory, if this was badly handled in transport between my purchase and me getting it home, it could have upset that spike enough to blast that bud. But it is the last one, yeah? And again, that indicates that these blooms haven't been open too long, which means they may last a good while. So as far as the plant is concerned, this often happens, yeah? The spike pushes out, yeah? And at a point not long after that, it's bent up to be staked. And the reason is, something that's packed like that, many can be packed close together, makes the transport cheaper. You get a lot more plants in a smaller space. That's why it's done. Yeah, and it also gives them a plastic thing for you to look through and something to stick a tag on. But nonetheless, because of the way that spike came out and its position, when it was staked, these two leaves have bent and they probably won't straighten out. They might do once the stake's out of the way. You could take a risk and actually pull the stake out of the pot and lean it and then push it back in so that you move the spike over. Okay, it means it wouldn't be upright, it would be at an angle, but the longer these leaves stay bent up like this, the less chance there is of them ever straightening outwards and making, you know, that's what they should look like that, not with curling back towards the centre of the plant. So now it's strange, I was almost hoping that in amongst these two plants there was a bad one, so that we could do the trying to recover a bad one. But it's pot luck when you buy from somewhere like that, what you get. It really is. I think I've been lucky and I've got two reasonable plants. Yeah, so that's the visual inspection. Bugless, no mould in the pot, reasonable root systems on both, and one of them turns out to be either two plants or like a conjoined pair of plants, which is what I suspect in that case. And blooms to last a while. Now, as I've said, these are not coming out in the grow room. These are going to be house plants. So the next thing we'll be looking at will be repotting them. They don't need it, but for my own benefit, now that I know there's some sort of PT type plug in there, once I start watering these on a regular basis, that's going to disintegrate incredibly quickly. Those little compressed peat plugs will only stay intact if dry most of the time. Once they start getting wet, first of all they hold a hell of a lot of water and they'll hold it for a long time, but then they disintegrate quite quickly. They're designed really for things that are going to be planted in the ground, you know, so that they break down in the soil. And in actual fact, a peaty-based thing in the soil would enrich it, probably. Anyway, so that's where we are with these two. Next session with these will be what's in my pot, actually getting them out of the pot, and looking at how small a pot I can get them in, and what I'm going to plant them in, and whether we've got any manky roots to trim off. And then we'll go from there. Okay, so this will be a series. I've set up a playlist, which I'll put in the description, because off the top of my head I can't remember what I called it, even though I only created it yesterday. At the moment there's one video already in there, which was the one I did yesterday. This will be the next one, followed by what's in my pot and getting them into some nice new media. So, and then we'll follow their progression. Initially there's probably going to be quite a few videos in relatively quick succession, but then there'll obviously be some long gaps while they're just in the place where they live, and a little bit of care now and again. But it's a long-term project, you know, this could go on a couple of years following these plants' progress, or demise, whichever way they decide to go. They are far more likely to survive longer term in the house than they are out here, and that might seem odd. Phalaenopsis don't do too well out here because it's far too cold for them in the winter, far too cold. I mean, I'm down to 12 degrees in here. And sometimes my daytime temperatures only get up to 14, 15, and over a long period of time that's just going to chill them. It doesn't do them any good at all. There are a couple of species that like those temperatures, but not many. These are warm growers by nature. And incredibly tolerant. We shall see how tolerant, depending on where I decide to stick them. And a lovely suggestion from a viewer is the analysis of the windowsills in my house as to where these would be best placed. That's a brilliant idea. I wouldn't have thought of that. Because I know where I'm going to put them eventually. But yeah, some thoughts on the various aspects of the windowsills. Anyway, that's that, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Whoops, nearly forgot your film quiz for those who enjoy that sort of thing. I just thought I'd point the camera at this. This is Dendrobium conico, and it's been out of bloom for a while now. Not a long while, because it was in bloom for a very long time, but it's managed to push a few more blooms out. I think it's going to run out on these. Oh no, there's another bunch here. I keep thinking these old canes are done, and they keep pushing out more and more blooms. So yeah, this is a good one. Right, film quiz. 2 for today then, and one of them is, if I figure this right, we're facing the sun. So what film was that from? Doesn't matter who said it. What else can we have? We can have... Hang on a minute. Phone's going. Right, flipping phone. I know it's got an off switch, but then it could be important. You never know. That wasn't. Right, and the other one you can have is stand fast, do not pursue that man. Stand fast, do not pursue that man. Who said it? And who was it said to? And the film, of course. So that's your 2 for today. Have fun. I don't class either of those as hard ones necessarily, but they are if you haven't seen the film, I suppose. See you next time.